It looks calm on the surface, but don't let that fool you. Canada's weather today is telling a much bigger story. From biting cold gripping the east to unusual warmth pushing into the west, the country is caught in a sharp atmospheric contrast that feels more like a battle between winter and spring than a simple seasonal transition. If you step outside in cities like Toronto, Ottawa, or Montreal, the reality hits immediately. The air is cold, not just cool, but deeply winter-like, with temperatures sitting between -8 and -12 degrees Celsius. Even though the calendar says spring has already begun, the atmosphere hasn't caught up. Clouds dominate the sky, and while snowfall is not intense, light flurries drift through at times, reminding everyone that winter still has a firm grip on this region. What makes this setup more interesting is not just the temperature itself, but how it feels. Wind chill is playing a major role across central and eastern Canada, making conditions feel significantly colder than the actual readings. This happens because of persistent airflow patterns that are pulling cold Arctic air southward, keeping the region locked in a winter-like state. Despite the presence of clouds and occasional flurries, the system is relatively dry overall, meaning there is no major storm system at play here. Instead, this is a classic case of lingering cold air mass dominance, where the atmosphere remains stable but cold, creating a quiet yet harsh environment. It's the kind of weather that doesn't make headlines with blizzards, but still impacts daily life in a significant way. Moving westward into the prairies, including regions like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, the story shifts slightly, but remains firmly rooted in winter. Here, light snow is more common, and in places like Winnipeg, temperatures are hovering around -9 degrees Celsius. The key factor in this region is wind. Strong and persistent winds are lifting loose snow from the ground, creating drifting snow and reducing visibility in open areas. This is not necessarily heavy snowfall from the sky, but rather snow already on the ground being redistributed by the wind. This phenomenon can be just as disruptive as a fresh snowfall, especially for travel, because it creates localized whiteout conditions that can change rapidly. The prairies are known for their openness, and that geography plays a huge role in how weather behaves here. Without significant praकृतिक barriers like mountains or dense forests, wind can travel long distances without obstruction, intensifying its impact. The combination of cold air and wind creates a harsher environment than the temperature alone would suggest. This is why even moderate snowfall can become a bigger issue in this region. The atmospheric pattern here is still influenced by the same cold air mass affecting central Canada, but with slightly more instability, allowing for these light snow events and blowing snow conditions. Now, as we move further west into Alberta, including major cities like Calgary and Edmonton, the weather narrative changes dramatically. This region is experiencing a noticeable break from the deep cold that dominates much of the country. Temperatures here are climbing into the range of 10 to 14 degrees Celsius, which feels almost spring-like compared to the rest of Canada. The skies are a mix of clouds and sunshine, and the overall atmosphere feels significantly more comfortable. This warmth is not random. It is being driven by Pacific air masses moving inland from the west coast. This is a classic example of how geography influences weather in Canada. The Rocky Mountains act as both a barrier and a channel, allowing milder Pacific air to spill into Alberta under the right conditions. When this happens, temperatures can rise quickly, creating a stark contrast with regions just to the east. This kind of temperature gradient across relatively short distances is a defining feature of Canadian weather during transitional seasons. It also highlights the dynamic nature of the atmosphere, where different regions can experience completely different seasons at the same time. Further west, in British Columbia, including coastal cities like Vancouver and Victoria, conditions remain relatively mild and stable. Temperatures are sitting around 10 to 11 degrees Celsius, with mostly cloudy skies and some coastal moisture. Unlike the prairies or eastern Canada, there is no significant cold air mass dominating this region. Instead, the Pacific Ocean plays a major role in moderating temperatures, preventing extreme cold and keeping conditions relatively balanced. While clouds are common and there may be occasional light precipitation, there are no major storm systems impacting the area right now. This coastal influence is one of the key reasons why British Columbia often experiences a completely different type of weather compared to the rest of the country. The ocean acts as a temperature regulator, absorbing and releasing heat more slowly than land, which keeps winters milder and summers cooler. This creates a more stable and predictable weather pattern, even when the rest of Canada is dealing with extreme conditions. However, the story changes once again as we move north into Canada's Arctic regions, including areas like Iqaluit and Yellowknife. Here, winter is not just lingering, it is fully entrenched. Temperatures are extremely cold, dropping to around -21 degrees Celsius in Iqaluit and -16 in Yellowknife. Light snow is present in some areas, but the defining characteristic of this region is the persistent, deep cold. Unlike southern Canada, where seasonal transitions are beginning to take shape, the Arctic remains firmly in winter mode. This is largely due to the position of the sun and the overall energy balance in the region. Even though daylight hours are increasing, the amount of solar energy reaching the surface is still relatively low, and the snow-covered landscape reflects much of that energy back into space. This prevents significant warming and allows cold air to remain dominant. The Arctic acts as a reservoir of cold air, and when conditions are right, that cold air can move southward, influencing weather patterns across the rest of the country. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, today's weather across Canada is a perfect example of a transitional season in action. There is no single unified pattern. Instead, there are multiple competing influences shaping conditions in different regions. Cold Arctic air continues to dominate the east and central parts of the country, while milder Pacific air is pushing into the west, creating a sharp contrast that defines the current weather setup. This kind of pattern is typical for late March, but it also serves as a reminder of how complex and dynamic the atmosphere can be. What makes this situation particularly interesting is how these contrasts can evolve over time. As spring progresses, the balance between cold and warm air masses will continue to shift, eventually leading to more consistent warming across the country. However, for now, winter is not ready to give up its hold, especially in central and northern regions. The result is a patchwork of conditions that range from deep winter to early spring, all existing simultaneously within the same country.